Everyone has noticed the crazy hike in food prices, but do you really know how bad it is? For exact values, some statisticians have revealed that food prices have experienced as high as a 50% hike over the last few years, and the worst part, it doesn't seem to be going down anytime soon. So what are the facts regarding the American food crisis? How does it affect the regular American citizen? And what does the future of grocery prices look like? Stay with us in this video to find out these and much more. The last 4 years have been terrible for the world economy, there's no question about it. The average American citizen has had to cut back on a lot of expenses and still had to struggle to make ends meet. Although it now seems like many years ago, earlier in 2024, there was a break from inflation in the United States for a lot of commodities. Gas prices went down, used cars, health insurance, and a whole lot more became a bit more affordable. Political conspirators claimed it was part of Joe Biden's method to boost his chances of re-election. Well, that didn't turn out so well, did it? Anywho, despite the break from inflation on all other things, one commodity that never took a break was groceries. A number of federal agencies responsible for tracking food and grocery prices, like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, have all put out statistics pointing to the crazy grocery price inflation over the last few years. Take the Consumer Price Index for food at home, for example, which had been kept constant since 2015. However, when the pandemic struck in 2020, the index rose by 4% till the end of the year, and it all went downhill from there. By the end of 2021, it had gone up by a further 6%, and by 2022, the Consumer Price Index was up by 12%. As a result, the numbers have it that grocery prices have jumped by 25% over the past 4 years, which is even greater than the 19% inflation rate of the overall economy over the same period of time. So yeah, you're not just assuming that the prices of appliances and smartphones have been decent, they actually have been way better than what it'll cost you to buy beef, sugar, or juice. And now that you have the numbers proving just how bad the grocery inflation has been, the next question on everyone's minds is why? What brought about this inflation? Well, we wish it was as simple as one thing, but it isn't. For starters, commodity prices played a big role in the ongoing food crisis in the US. Based on comparison charts between the agriculture and livestock commodities of some of the nation's largest infrastructure firms and the grocery index, it's been proven that grocery prices take a hike when there's general commodity inflation or collapse. Remember the commodity hike in 2008, the hike in 2011, or the collapse in 2015. They all led to crazy grocery inflations in the months that followed. What makes this era of grocery inflation even worse, however, is that we live in a post-pandemic world. Just like the structure of social media, education, and even entertainment have experienced a permanent change since the pandemic, the same applies to the grocery prices. During the lockdown in 2020, grocery prices started taking a gradual run-up, but no one paid attention because we could explain it. Production processes were shut down, meaning less available goods for sale, meaning the law of cost and demand kicks in. Basic economics, right? Well, to counter this grocery inflation, the government and private-owned businesses applied policies to increase the wages of workers, particularly in the manufacturing and processing industry, as well as wages for grocery store workers. These wages have remained on a steady increase since the pandemic, which is a good thing for the average working-class person. But guess what? The grocery prices have gone up simultaneously. While grocery prices are on a 25% hike since the start of the pandemic, the increase in these workers' wages has been roughly 15% over the same period. This is because of the increased demand for groceries since the pandemic began. What started as an increased demand for food because everyone was stuck at home has not turned into a normal way of living even after the pandemic. We'll break it down this way. Before 2020, the diet of many Americans didn't include as much higher quality specialty goods and organic items. However, lockdown and sensitivity to a global virus help people cultivate new habits that require more meat, more nuts, and more fresh organic produce. While this is good for the medical side of things, since it means Americans now eat a tiny bit healthier, the economic side isn't so good. Organic foods and high-quality foods have always been in lower circulation than any other type of grocery, but since the pandemic, the demand is more for these items, making them harder to come by. Even with the earlier wage increase for workers in this field, it's still nearly impossible to meet up with the demands. The available products just keep getting more expensive. Experts have shown that the average American household now allocates more than double of their income to groceries since the start of 2020, and except for some reason like we all revert to eating like we did before the pandemic, that number is going to keep increasing. And this increased customer demand and worker wages aren't issues that can be faulted, since the events leading up to a global pandemic were out of anybody's hands. If there's any other factor to take the blame for grocery inflation, however, it's the hiked corporate profit margins. According to a report by the Federal Trade Commission in March 2024, food and beverage retailers have continually had their revenue larger than their costs. And before you say, well, making a profit is the aim of any business, get this. Prior to 2021, the percentage by which grocery retailers see their revenue outpace cost was between 1 and 3%. In 2021, that number hit an all-time high of 6%. By 2023, it was even higher, reaching 7%. So does this mean we blame the CEOs of grocery production and retail stores? Well, apparently, yes. These retailers have always relied on a number of factors to maintain profitability, but the dysfunctional economy in recent years has given them room to milk price hikes for their own benefit. One perfect product to explain this is chocolate. The prices for chocolate hiked with every other raw material-based grocery during the pandemic, but it's continued to increase ever since. The prices skyrocketed this year due to record-high cocoa prices, forcing a higher number of shoppers to stop buying so much chocolate by March 2024. So what did the production companies do? They made product changes like shrinking the size of one chocolate bar, but did they reduce the price to reflect the shrunk size? Nope, they sell it for the exact same price, thereby widening their profit margins in a market maneuver called shrinkflation. President Biden and the House of Congress tried taking strict measures against food companies to counter these tactics earlier this year, but not much has changed. And chocolate is just one item. Now think of all the possible grocery items which have been reduced in size and still sold for the same prices. Do you see how that could make grocery inflation worse? Now, that's not to say there are not other unavoidable events that cause a surge in food prices, like the war in Ukraine, for example. This war has messed up food exports because Ukraine single-handedly accounted for 9% of the global wheat market and 12% of the corn market before the war, meaning a significant reduction in the circulation of those products around the world. Fruits and vegetable prices have also been affected by drought and extreme heat conditions as a result of climate change. India and Thailand have suffered dry spells which have limited sugar exports from those countries. Even chicken and egg prices soared this year due to the largest avian flu outbreak in US history. All this goes to show that grocery price inflation cannot be completely curtailed. But what does this mean for the average American citizen? For low-income households, it means spending an unthinkable 31% of their income on food, when in 2022 they spent only 12%. And middle-class households now spend 14% of after-tax income, while households in the highest income quintile spend 8% of after-tax income on food. This also means that blue-collar workers now have to work an extra 36 to 45 minutes to be able to afford the same kind and quantity of foods that they bought in 2019. Surveys have also revealed that by the start of the year 2024, 44% of consumers complained of having food insecurity, a percentage which used to be about 25% by May 2022. But that's not all. The food price hike has also caused almost 60% of consumers to redo their grocery list, cutting back on anything deemed non-essential. A similar survey has shown that 46% of consumers began cooking from scratch or with pre-prepared foods in the second quarter of 2024 just to save money, a number that was at 38% just over a year ago. And food insecurity has also had a drastic effect on food banks around the country, who now face constant insufficiency to feed people. This has been a developing problem since the lockdown, but became significantly worse in February 2024, when all extra pandemic food stamps were declared expired. Now, using the Rhode Island Community Food Bank in Providence as an example, they now have to serve about 80,000 people a month, which is 20% more than they served just a year ago. So now the million-dollar question, are the food prices going down anytime soon? The honest answer, it is very unlikely. The United States Department of Agriculture Economic Research Service reported in mid-2024 that food prices will continue to go up by next year, but at a slower rate than it has in previous years. Already the rate has dropped by a decent amount. Grocery prices were 1.3% higher year-over-year in September, but only went up by 0.4% in October, while restaurant prices were 3.9% higher year-over-year, but have only gone up by 0.3% from August to September 2024. True, these are very few improvements, but they are improvements nonetheless. For the political side of it, although President-elect Donald Trump has proposed policies to reduce inflation, his plans to place new tariffs on trillions of dollars of imports and mass deportations of undocumented immigrants will also reduce the working population of food production companies. Not to pick any political sides, but that's definitely not going to do grocery prices any benefit. But that's an issue for the future. For now, we just have to adapt to the new reality and find ways to cut down grocery costs in our individual lives. That's all for this video on America's food crisis. What do you think about the recent grocery inflation and how has it affected you and your family? Let us know in the comments section and enjoy our other videos.